Hey guys, welcome to a new video. Like, comment and subscribe if you enjoy. Without any further interruptions, enjoy the What If. Chapter 37. Favors. Per Kyoraku's plan, Ichigo accompanied the Taicho to Soul Society. In order for this to work, the pair of them would need to be seen as much as possible, taking shameless advantage of Ichigo's popularity. Is that Kurosaki Ichigo? It is. Look, that orange hair, the cleaver-shaped Zanpakuto as big as he is, it must be. Ichigo did his best to ignore the not-so-quiet onlookers and followers as he followed Kyoraku through the Seraiti. He was very tempted to use his new ability to seal Zangetsu, but as Kyoraku had said, he would need to be highly visible for the next part. Are you sure you want to do this? Kyoraku asked, just loud enough for the Shinigami following them to hear. Yeah, I'm sure, Ichigo responded resolutely, just as loud. Soul Society needs to know how Aizen came to be, and his motivations. Otherwise, we'll just have another one in a few centuries, and maybe that one will succeed where this one failed. But surely you could give that in private. No, this is the way it has to be, Kyoraku Taicho. Every Shinigami needs to know this, just in case another one is already in the works. They have to know that I will not tolerate anything happening to my town. Of course, I understand, and I'll spread the word. At 1 o'clock, in front of the Senkaimon, you will have your chance to speak. We owe you that much, Kyoraku admitted. Both of them noticed how the Shinigami following them, they weren't close enough for Ichigo to see what division they were a part of, dispersed quickly, apparently to spread the news. Of course, none of them knew that entire conversation had been scripted. Alright, Kurosaki-san, thanks for this. No problem. If it gets everyone off my back, then I should be thanking you, Ichigo replied. To be honest, I've been worrying for a while now what Soul Society was going to do. It's nice to be able to actually do something about it. Well, we have a few hours, would you care for a drink? Kyoraku offered. Ichigo was going to deny the friendly Taicho, reminding him about being underage, but as he was opening his mouth, he thought about the idea. Adults drink socially, and to relieve tension, he remembered. And tension has been my biggest problem lately. I suppose a small drink couldn't hurt, he finally conceded. Kyoraku smiled and led Ichigo back to a grassy area near Division's barracks. Several minutes later, the pair of them were sitting in the grass, drinking. Ichigo was merely sipping his sake, being unused to the taste, while Kyoraku was drinking somewhat faster, but the silence was comfortable between them. What's it like, being a Taicho? Ichigo questioned suddenly. Kyoraku took another drink as he considered the question. It really depends on the person, but in general, being a Taicho means being responsible for your division and the duties of that division. There isn't much call for our combat abilities outside the 11th division, as Maino's class hollows don't usually visit the living world, and most others can be purified by our subordinates. He looked up to the azure sky pensively. The respect is nice, and the responsibilities do come with perks, excellent pay, and as long as there aren't any problems you can do pretty much whatever you want. Most of the Taicho really only have to do paperwork, and even that can be delegated somewhat. Sounds like a pretty cushy job, the wizard commented. Kyoraku laughed. It really is, usually. But there's a reason for that. We do have to maintain our fighting skills, in case we're ever needed. How often does that happen? Not very frequently, the Taicho admitted. Perhaps 2 or 3 times per century, he shrugged. We're the military of Soul Society, so we have to stay strong, just in case. That's just the way it is. Why do you ask? Kyoraku followed up, thinking about Chong in your mind. Maybe, if your plan works today, I'll think about it. After that answer, the pair sat in comfortable silence, slowly drinking their way through a bottle. Finally, Ichigo got up and stretched. I think I'll go see some of the others. Thanks for the drink, Kyoraku Taicho. You're welcome anytime, Kurosaki-san. Every single wizard in their warehouse was silent, sitting quietly around Shinji, who was absolutely motionless in a meditative position. He'd had the idea to use Jinzen to try to talk to his inner hollow, and just in case he had the fight then and there, had Hachi set up a barrier around him, with the other wizard on standby. Shinji looked around in his inner world, standing in an oasis in the middle of the desert. Above him, he could see himself on a mirrored image of the island. It had been some time since he had performed Jinzen, but Shinji knew where to look to see his Zanpakuto spirit, Sakanade. He dove underneath the water and flipped himself upside down, swimming back to the shore, which appeared as a completely backwards form of the above-ground oasis, and approached the lone palm tree, where a figure was looking out into the desert. Sakanade, Shinji greeted the figure. Sakanade took the form of a heavily tanned young man with pitch-black hair, with almost all of his body covered in soft white clothing. On the clothing lay reversed words that flowed and changed at seemingly random intervals. Shinji, it's been a while. It has, the wizard agreed. I had begun to wonder if you would ever accept your own reversed self. Sakanade looked out into the desert again, where a mirage briefly formed into an enormous version of Shinji's mask. You buried your hollow far beneath the desert sands, but he still lives, Shinji. How do I get him out? Sakanade laughed. All things in this world are reversed, Shinji, you know that. If he is to your left, look right. If he is in front, look behind. If he is beneath, look above. And when he did, Shinji was taken aback at how his bleached white hollow self was looking back at him with anger and resentment from within another reflection of the oasis in the sky. In an instant, the hollow form of Shinji leapt up and landed feet first in front of the wizard. Hi, Shinji, the inner hollow spat. Come to gloat your victory over me after 100 years of prison. No, of course not. You're just here because you want something from me. Why should I help you? Shinji's expression didn't change. Because I want to offer you a deal, and rectify a mistake I never knew I made until some kid proved me wrong. HMPH. I don't care. Not even if it means I give you control of my body. That got the hollow's attention. All right, I'm listening. Ichigo walked into the 10th Division barracks, briefly focusing on his Reiatsu sense to detect where Hitsugaya was, and walking in that direction, eventually coming across a closed door. He knocked. Come in. Ichigo stepped inside and was greeted with a rare surprised expression on the young Taicho's face. Kurosaki, he exclaimed before getting his facial muscles under control and reassuming his business expression. It's fortunate you're here, I needed to talk to you anyway. Ichigo frowned pensively. Wonder what it is. What is it, Toshiro? The Taicho didn't even bother correcting him this time, he was apparently in quite a rush. Firstly, Hinamori Fukuteicho was attacked last night by an assassin of some sort, but he or she committed suicide via body-dissolving suicide pill before we could find out who it was. We've already ruled out Soifan's forces. Do you know anyone who would know or could find out who it was, discreetly? The wizard blinked in surprise. Wait, Hinamori was attacked. Yes, she was. Do you know anyone in the living world who could help figure out who it was? Hitsugaya asked impatiently. Ichigo quickly ran through the people he knew there. Bodies completely dissolved, so I don't think Inoue could help by restoring him. Chad's power is more physical than detective. I don't know much about the rest of the wizard's powers, he shook his head negatively. Only Urahara and Yoruichi, and I don't see how they could help much if you already have Kuretsuchi and Soifan looking into it. Oh, Hitsugaya sighed, shrinking a little for a moment before fixing Ichigo with another piercing look. The Gote 13 is considering asking you to be Taicho of the 5th Division. I know. Hiraku Taicho told me, Ichigo admitted. Hitsugaya stiffened. Did you agree? No. Why? Thank goodness, the Ice Taicho breathed in relief. Is something wrong with me becoming a Taicho? Ichigo asked, confused. Hinamori is the 5th Division Fukuteicho, Hitsugaya explained briefly. And since she was hit with Aizen's illusion and thinks that you're evil. Ichigo blanched. Yeah, that could have posed a problem. More than you know. Worst came to worst, it's pretty likely she would be executed or quietly, retired, to a prison. I need you to deny any requests of that nature until she's well enough to work with you, Hitsugaya elaborated. Consider it a personal favor. No problem, the substitute Shinigami agreed easily, not wanting anyone to be executed or imprisoned for being one of Aizen's victims. Thank you, Hitsugaya said sincerely, looking Ichigo in the eyes. Is something else wrong? Ichigo queried slowly. You seem to be in quite a rush. Hitsugaya took a deep breath and fixed Ichigo with a piercing stare. I'm trying to finish my paperwork early, so I can take Hinamori Fukuteicho to hear yours and Aizen's story at 1 o'clock. I think it will help her, in more ways than one. Oh, Ichigo was startled that even the other Taicho had heard of it. It hadn't been that long since they'd spoken their plan aloud in front of Shinigami, who would pass it along, surely. I'll leave you to it, then. Hitsugaya merely nodded and began furiously working through the paperwork once more, leaving a slightly disturbed Ichigo to find his way out. How many people are going to want to hear this? Ichigo stepped out of the barracks and had to blink. He was surrounded by hopeful-looking and odd Shinigami of nearly every division. I suppose that answers your question, huh? Cazador remarked. It's him. This is Kurosaki Ichigo. Is that the famed Zangetsu? It's more impressive than I imagined. Do you think he's single? Ichigo felt his face heating up at the last question, and he began looking around desperately for a way out. Flickering into a shunpo, he reappeared on top of a nearby building before shunpoing again as far away as he could. Yeah, I'm definitely not becoming a Taicho until I absolutely have to. I don't know if some of those women are offering. Shut up. Cazador laughed in Ichigo's head. I'm your instinct, Ichigo. You can't hide how much you secretly like that idea from me. Ichigo scowled, but said nothing more. Even if what Cazador said was true, he wasn't going to act on that impulse. He wasn't that kind of man, to take advantage of women like that. Besides, it'll just lead to more trouble than it's worth. Let's go check on Rukia, and then maybe Renji can point me out to a decent place to eat lunch. But before he could even begin to head towards what he guessed was the 13th Division's barracks, a nearby voice gave him chills. Ichigo. Zaraki greeted with a bloodthirsty grin. Are you here for a rematch? Ichigo looked around, and realized where he was, the 11th Division training grounds. When he'd shunpoed away in a random direction, he must have accidentally reached them. Why not? It'll be a good measure of how far I've come. Shrugging, he turned to Zaraki and gave a cocky grin. Think you can cut me? Zaraki gave a boisterous, maniacal laugh. You're on. He drew his sword, and instantly, every single member of the division still on the training grounds began to run away to a hopefully safe distance. Ichigo reached up and grabbed Zangetsu, the cloth unwrapping itself as he brought it to a ready position, also wielding with one hand. Zaraki lunged forward, eyes gleaming as he brought his sword forward for an initial horizontal slice, only to be deflected upwards by Zangetsu, leaving the Taicho wide open for a kick that knocked him back into a wall, collapsing it on top of Zaraki. You'll have to try harder than that, Ichigo taunted. A sinister, bloodthirsty yellow aura erupted from where Zaraki was buried, sending the rubble flying everywhere. Zaraki's eye patch had been sheared off by a rock, and he looked positively eager as his Reiatsu twisted and swirled, forming the image of a skull for a brief moment. Come on then, Ichigo. The two rushed at each other and their blades clashed together, Shikai against Shikai, with a burst of Reiatsu that sent dust and debris flying in all directions. As one, they both leapt backwards before re-entering close combat. Ichigo jumped over Zaraki's opening slash and the Taicho's head, landing behind him before twisting and lashing out with Zangetsu. Zaraki evaded by jumping forward and twisting himself so he could see his opponent, but was caught off guard when Ichigo released his hold on Zangetsu, instead wielding the Zanpakuto by the cloth, giving Ichigo extra range and landing a cut to Zaraki's left arm. The Taicho ignored the cut and instead took advantage of Ichigo's opening to dash in with inhuman speed. Ichigo realized his mistake not a moment too soon and yanked on Zangetsu's cloth, but he knew it would take a moment for his sword to return to him. In that moment, he would have to rely on his hand-to-hand skills. He allowed himself to fall backwards, letting Zaraki's unnamed Zanpakuto pass over him harmlessly, lashed out with a brutal kick to Zaraki's left side. But Zaraki wasn't a Taicho for no reason. He was an absolute master of the sword, and of Hakuda. He caught Ichigo's ankle before it could reach him, and for the barest of instants, Ichigo's and Zaraki's eyes met, both looking downright devious. Zaraki suddenly remembered something and ducked just in time for Zangetsu to fly over his head. Ichigo reached up and snagged it with his right hand, immediately using it to block Zaraki's downward stab towards Ichigo's chest. As the two were deadlocked for a few moments, Ichigo smirked. You've forgotten something, Kenpachi. And what's that, Ichigo? Zaraki was grinning madly, having the time of his life. There's more to my sword than the blade. Without warning, the cloth trailing for Zangetsu's hilt lashed out, wrapping around Zaraki's right ankle tightly. Ichigo pulled hard, and Zaraki was suddenly falling backwards as his foot gave out from under him. Instinctively letting go of Ichigo's ankle so he could put some distance between them, Zaraki immediately swiped at the cloth and cut the connection between them. The pressure off Ichigo, he rolled backwards and jumped up to a ready position. Zaraki was up almost as quickly. "You've learned some new tricks, Ichigo. I couldn't just stay a naive kid, Kenpachi," Ichigo retorted with a tight grin. "Last time I beat you, I was only just learning how to use my Zanpakuto." "Let me see that famed Getsuga Tensho of yours," Zaraki demanded. "Let's test your power against mine. One more attack for each of us, to see who's stronger." Ichigo smirked and raised Zangetsu above his head, charging enough energy to make the blade glow a bright azure blue. "Don't blame me if you wind up in the 4th Division's care," he cautioned. "Enough." Both fighters turned to the newcomer, surprised to see Unohana Taicho stalking towards them. Ichigo's Getsuga faded as his concentration failed to maintain it. "Zaraki Taicho, you know perfectly well that Kurosaki-san could kill you quite easily." "Well, yeah, but that's why we kept things in Shikai," Zaraki explained. "Just a casual no-holds-barred spar, right Ichigo?" "Right," Ichigo agreed nervously, looking at Unohana's creepy smile and shivering subtly. Somehow, that smile scared him far more than Aizen ever had. Aizen had cut him almost in half, driven him temporarily insane, pushed him to despair, but there was a level of scariness in Unohana's smile that still put all those experiences to shame. The fear just rose as Unohana turned her attention to the substitute Shinigami. "Please explain how this was just a casual no-holds-barred spar," she requested calmly with that smile. "I was just seeing how much stronger I'd become since the last time I fought Kenpachi, Unohana Taicho," Ichigo said quickly, almost tripping over his words in his hurry to excuse himself. "I didn't have Bankai or my hollow powers back then, and it's not like we were really trying to kill each other," he reasoned. He steadfastly ignored Kenpachi's answering K of derision, knowing perfectly well that Kenpachi probably was aiming to kill, as always. Unohana looked around at the blatant destruction of the barracks and nearby areas and mentally sighed. "We just had this fixed yesterday, and I suppose it is good to know the extent of Kurosaki-san's skills. I must request that your spar come to an early end, then," she stated clearly. "My division is overworked as it is tending to the wounded and the other general chores. Unless you want your barracks to be repaired sometime next month, I would suggest you stop." Zaraki let out a sigh and lowered his sword, Ichigo doing the same. Fine, thanks for the fight, Ichigo. Come by any time." "Thanks, Kenpachi." "Oh, Unohana Taicho, could you point me in the direction of the 13th Division?" Unohana pointed in the appropriate direction. "The 13th Division is that way, just a few blocks away." "Thanks." Ichigo flickered away in Shunpo, leaving Unohana to her thoughts. That was far too close, she thought privately to herself. She'd had to hurry to stop them after she'd sensed their battling Reiatsu. If Kurosaki-san had won that spar, or worse, killed Zaraki Taicho with his Getsuga, then he would have had the 200 witnesses from Zaraki's division right there. He would have been made Taicho, despite everything. She took a deep, steadying breath. Hinamori-chan is getting better, but she must work through far more before she can work with Kurosaki-san even on a professional basis. "I just hope Hitsugaya Taicho knows what he's doing," taking Hinamori-chan to hear Kurosaki-san's story. Ishida, Chad and Inoue watched Kon closely during class. The mod soul had a bad history of perverted actions that reflected badly on Ichigo. But it seemed the wizard had finally found an effective threat. While Kon seemed impatient and unhappy with being forced to sit in class for Ichigo, and occasionally took a few seconds to leer at some of the young women in their class, he seemed to be largely behaving himself. Ishida stiffened, suddenly sensing a hollow in the area. He was about to get up and excuse himself, but remembered his oath. Settling back down in his seat reluctantly, he gave Chad a significant look. Chad nodded in acknowledgement and stood up himself. "Please excuse me, something important has just come up. I will be back shortly." Before the teacher, Ochi Misato, could reply, Chad had already run out the door. Ochi sighed. She'd grown used to these unexplained, unexpected absences. But strangely, for some reason, she thought she faintly heard a strange sound just before Chad had rushed out. It was almost like a roar, but not one she'd ever heard before. Ochi was about to dismiss it as part of her imagination, but then she saw Mizuhiro, Keigo, and Tatsuki give each other significant looks. Did they hear it too? After another moment's thought, she shrugged. It was probably some idiot gang member yelling downstairs to fight Ichigo and Chad. With that, she resumed the lesson. When Chad returned a few minutes later without a scratch on him, she shook her head. Those idiots never learn. Chad is inhumanly hard to hurt. Ochi knew the rumors that spread, though she had trouble believing some of them herself. Chad's a good kid. Maybe one day they'll leave him alone. Finally, it was time for lunch, and immediately all of Ichigo's friends cornered Kon. Kon, why are you in Ichigo's body? Ishida started the interrogation, his glasses glinting intimidatingly. I don't know. Kon replied quickly. I was sleeping, and then he just wakes me up, puts me in his body, tells me to go to school and behave or else he'll give me to Yuzu for another bossed-off treatment. Was Ichigo with another Shinigami? Inoue asked. I didn't see any, Kon denied. There could have been some in the house, though, as I just jumped out the window. Could you guys let us in on what's going on? Keigo inquired tentatively. Ishida sighed. Kon here is an artificial soul developed by Soul Society. His natural form is that of a small round green pill. But when Kurosaki swallows him, Kon takes Kurosaki's body, allowing Kurosaki to emerge in his soul form as a Shinigami. Kon is here, while Ichigo is not. We are curious why, Chad summarized. This explains a lot, Tatsuki muttered under her breath. So, Kon, what do you know? Kon thought about it for a few seconds. Sorry, but I don't know anything. Ichigo was serious as always, didn't see any Shinigami or hear any hollows. I suggest we visit Ichigo after school then, and find out what's going on, Mizuhiro offered. Besides, I know I have a lot of questions for him. Not everything got explained. Keigo and Tatsuki nodded as well, feeling the same way. Ishida sighed and straightened, pushing his glasses up his nose with his middle finger. As we can't get anything useful out of Kon, we have some time. What do you want to know? In the meantime, Ichigo was enjoying a nice, blessedly quiet lunch with Yukitake and Rukia, amiably chatting. Ichigo had been curious what Soul Society had been up to since Aizen's death, and was grimly unsurprised that it had largely revolved around him. Rukia, however, was more concerned about their mutual friends, and Ichigo had related Ishida's resolution to not use his Quincy powers unless a life depended on them. Rukia stared in blatant shock. Ishida was so very proud of his Quincy heritage. Why would he? He said that it was an oath he made to his father in order to get the training he needed to be helpful during the Winter War, Ichigo elaborated. I have to say that is somewhat of a relief, Yukitake admitted. Seeing both younger Shinigami turn to look at him questioningly, he quickly expanded on his statement. He is a very strong Quincy, and while his aid was needed, there is no denying that he destroys souls, rather than purifying them. So, having that sort of oath puts him in a very good light. It prevents unnecessary soul destruction. Ichigo reluctantly conceded the point with a nod of acknowledgement. Why do I suddenly have fans? He asked bluntly. Well, Yukitake chuckled embarrassedly. Let's just say that Fukutecho aren't known for their discretion. Word got out that you were the one to take out Aizen, and somehow or other a joke Kyoraku Taicho made about what you were got brought up, and now the phrase, Hell's Nightmare, is being bandied about like it's your official title. Wait, what? Ichigo deadpanned. While privately he had to admit it was a badass title, and one he would have rubbed in Renji's face months ago, all Ichigo really wanted right now was to be left alone and live a quiet life for a while. Well, you have to have expected at least some public goodwill, Rukia reminded her friend. I mean, it's publicly known that you're a substitute Shinigami, you invaded Soul Society with your companions to save me and succeeded, and won against Aizen, and you haven't even reached half a century in age. I imagine most of them are waiting to see what you'll do next, and want to be nearby so they can witness it firsthand. Ichigo was starting to feel very sick to his stomach and his face began paling. Just, how many people are going to be there to hear my story? I imagine a good part of the Gote 13, Yukitake answered easily. Most if not all the Taicho and Fukutecho, and I'd say about 3/4 of the unseated officers. I hear even the Shinigami Academy has decided to make it a field trip. Oh no, Ichigo had no problem speaking in public with small groups of people, but in front of almost an entire society. That's just a bit overwhelming. Why didn't you have problems in Hueco Mundo, then? When you got named king and all? Cazador demanded, confused. I was too tired to care, and I knew what to expect. They respected strength. No real speeches needed, Ichigo explained quickly. Abandon your fear, Ichigo, Zangetsu reminded him softly. Accept that it exists, and move past it. Keep moving forward. Ichigo took a deep breath and nodded. Are you okay, Ichigo? Rukia asked, concerned. I'll be fine, he replied, still feeling a bit queasy. Just not used to being on the spot in front of so many at a time. Why did you decide to do this, then? Yukatake questioned, curious. He set down his tea and looked at Ichigo directly, waiting for the young man's answer. Everyone needs to know the truth of what happened, Ichigo trailed off for a moment before sighing. You'll understand when I tell the whole story. Speaking of, it's almost 1 o'clock now, Rukia announced. We should go. Ichigo nodded and rose from his sitting position. His two companions got up as well, and the three of them began walking to the Senkaimon. A podium and hundreds of seats had been set up on short notice, and Ichigo could see several 12th Division members working feverishly to set up what looked to be sound equipment so everyone could hear. Everywhere he looked, he saw Shinigami sitting or standing nearby, and Ichigo swallowed hard. A nearby clock struck 1. Ichigo took a deep breath. It's time. I've come here today to set the record straight, to tell everyone in the Seraiti the truth of what happened, and to warn you. His voice echoed out from the speakers the 12th Division had set up, and he could see the crowd shifting at his last words, so he continued. My story begins hundreds years ago, long before I was born, while Aizen was still merely a cadet in the Shinigami Academy. Utter silence met Ichigo's opening, and he could see that every soul in sight was listening. He then continued to explain what he knew of Aizen's past, how he had decided the Central 46 was corrupt, and how he'd come to realize that the Spirit King would have to be replaced. Ichigo went on, repeating what Aizen had told him and Hinamori about his ambition to replace Yamamoto, only to be foiled by Kiraku having seniority. On and on Ichigo spoke, relating Aizen's struggles to achieve the strength he so desperately needed for his goal. The Hogyoku, the hollowification of Soul Society's forces, and the beginning of his plan to steal Urahara's Hogyoku, Ichigo left nothing out. Urahara, with the help of the then Taicho of the Kido Corps, stabilized the infected Shinigami, who had involuntarily been infected with hollow powers. They would become known as the Vizard. But Aizen had covered his tracks well, and the Central 46 deemed Urahara to be the one who had performed the hollowification experiments, and demanded the Vizard be treated as hollows and immediately killed. Ichigo paused as the entire crowd began murmuring and muttering at this. Urahara, with the help of Shihoin Yoruichi, managed to smuggle the Vizard out to the real world, where the Shinigami hollow hybrids sweat and bled to maintain their sanity, burying their hollows deep within their souls, and gaining their powers. At some point, my father, Kurosaki Isshin, was a Taicho here in the Gote 13. He lost his powers and came to the living world, falling in love with my mother, a human named Kurosaki Masaki. And that is where I finally come in, Ichigo continued. I was born 15 years ago, and for as long as I can remember, I've been able to see ghosts. 9 years after that, Ichigo's voice choked, but he swallowed and soldiered on. 9 years after that, Aizen ordered a hit on my mother, and she was devoured in front of me by the hollow known as Grand Fisher, in a successful attempt to give me the motivation I needed to grow as strong as possible so I could reach Aizen's level. Ichigo was forced to wait a minute as he heard a mix of very loud, very vehement reactions. Finally, when it quieted a bit more, he continued on. I was 15 when a Shinigami jumped in through my window, looking for a hollow that had appeared nearby. Her name was Kuchiki Rukia, and despite her efforts, she was defeated and my family was about to be eaten by the hollow. Ichigo closed his eyes. He could still hear that fated conversation as clearly as though it were happening right now. Do you want the power to save your family? Ichigo's eyes snapped open. There was no other way. Rukia gave me her Shinigami powers. With them, I slew that hollow, and entered a world I had never known existed. The Vizard skipped ahead a bit, not wanting to go into detail about his fight with the Grand Fisher, and then described how Rukia had been retrieved by her brother and Renji, and then sentenced to death by Aizen, who had killed the Central 46 and was acting in their stead. He related his experience in the Shattered Shaft to regain his powers, and mentioned the side effect of developing his inner hollow. As you all know what happened when my friends and I invaded Soul Society, I'm going to skip directly to the end, Ichigo said bluntly. I mastered my hollow powers because without them I didn't stand a chance against Aizen. And I killed him in the end. But this is not a story of good and evil, this is a story of tragedy. Aizen was a very lonely soul. I know this because every time we fought, I felt the heavy solitude echoing in his Zanpakuto, and it only grew over time. Since the beginning, he was always better, stronger, smarter, more ambitious than everyone else around him. But while he faked it well, Aizen didn't know how to truly connect with people, he couldn't understand emotional motivations. That never changed, even when he became a Taicho. In our last fight, Aizen held immortality in the palm of his hand, and gave it up at the last moment because he chose death over eternal solitude. That should tell you something about his character. In the end, when you look at everything he did, Aizen did what he thought was right. And I killed him because I thought I was right. And that is what makes it a tragedy. If Aizen had used more peaceful methods, he could have been a revolutionary, universally hailed as a harbinger of better times in Soul Society. Peace to the more violent Rukongai districts, equality of all souls, careful research of traditionally forbidden ideas to find useful, safe ways to help people, Ichigo threw his hands up in the air exasperatedly. I don't know what it sounds like to you, but to me, those don't sound bad. And that brings me to my warning. I guarantee you Aizen was not the only one who saw these things and thought to do something about it. Unless something changes, another Aizen will appear one day. And he will study what Aizen did, see where he made mistakes, and create a better plan. So I implore you, find ways to improve the quality of living not just the Seraiti, but in all Soul Society. After all, I'm sure many of you have friends and family members somewhere out there. I know I do. Ichigo stepped down from the podium. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw Hitsugaya holding a sobbing Hinamori and he felt a wave of pity wash over him. Poor girl. Hiraku stepped up to the podium and cleared his throat. Thank you, Kurosaki Ichigo. You may be pleased to know that Soul Society has just passed an edict that to prevent another such tragedy, the Central 46 must design and implement a working local justice system into each district of the Rukongai before they can address any new issues. In the meantime, the Council of Taicho will address any issues deemed critical by the Central 46. It is our hope that in doing so, many of the injustices noted by Aizen may be avoided in the future. Ichigo barely withheld a grin. There were 80 districts in each compass direction of the Rukongai. Designing and implementing justice systems for 320 districts would take time, a lot of time. Years, decades, perhaps even centuries. By the time the Central 46 finished, Ichigo and his friends would probably be long dead, making the point moot. Hiraku could not have done this without Ichigo using his fame to publicly humanize Aizen, thereby giving the new edict the background of being a necessary measure, enough for the Central 46 to not be able to simply reject the edict. Now, if they did, the Gotei 13 would have ample reason to abolish the Central 46 on the grounds of them being unwilling to resolve an ongoing critical issue, and they'd have the public support to do it, too. Two men just hogtied a government, Hiraku mentally chortled. If this is what it's like to be Sotaicho, I could definitely get used to it. There's a certain satisfaction to legally sticking it to the Central 46. Chapter 38. Reconciliation. Hitsugaya and Hinamori walked slowly back to the 4th Division Infirmary in silence. Though all around them were Shinigami of all ages and ranks discussing Kurosaki's speech, the two childhood friends were alone with each other, each not sure how to broach the subject, but each knowing that if they wanted any sort of privacy it would have to wait until they reached Hinamori's room. Several minutes later, they sat opposite each other, Hinamori on her bed, Hitsugaya on the visitor's chair. They sat quietly for a moment, before both opened their mouths. Momo, Shiro-chan, you first, they said together, realizing they'd spoken at the same time. You go first, Momo, Hitsugaya quickly reiterated. Hinamori hesitantly nodded. I don't know what to think anymore, Shiro-chan. I knew Aizen Taicho for years, he helped me reach Fukutecho, and I was faithful. Why does Kurosaki think he knows Aizen Taicho better? Hitsugaya knew what Hinamori was asking. You mean, why does he think Aizen was lonely, he clarified. Hinamori nodded miserably. If he was lonely, how come no one ever saw it? How can Kurosaki be so sure? Momo. Hitsugaya decided to give her a quick lesson through first-hand experience. Draw Tobiyame. What? Draw your Zanpakuto, the Taicho insisted, reaching for his own Hyarinmaru, and touched Tobiyame to Hyarinmaru. Confused, the Fukutecho did as Hitsugaya asked, and when the Zanpakuto touched, Hinamori gasped. As this? Hitsugaya nodded. I've asked Hyarinmaru to amplify it a little so you can feel it better. You can feel my emotions, right? I feel pride, concern, Hinamori whispered. It was a wholly new experience for her. And in your Zanpakuto I feel fear, confusion, doubt, and now wonder and awe, Hitsugaya answered easily. Those who are skilled enough and powerful enough, can interpret the emotions and resolve of their opponents from just a single instance of their blades meeting. Kurosaki Ichigo's Tensa Zangetsu met Aizen's Kyoka Suigetsu far more than just once, Momo. Aizen's strongest emotions were laid bare to him, as bare as mine are to you now. That is how Kurosaki knows, and he has no reason to lie. In a sense, he knows Aizen now far better than anyone ever has, or ever will. Hinamori chuckled weakly, bitterly. Aizen Taicho was so lonely, then, and I never noticed. She shrunk in on herself, trembling as she released her grip on her sword to hug her knees to her chest. Momo, it's not your fault, Hitsugaya murmured, standing up and moving to sit next to his best friend. It is, Toshiro, she argued fiercely, turning bloodshot eyes in the icy Taicho's direction. If I had just seen it, then Aizen Taicho wouldn't have been lonely and he would still be alive now. Even if you had seen it, what could you have done? Hitsugaya contended, his voice becoming stern in his attempt to make Hinamori see reason. Single-handedly fixed everything that Aizen saw was wrong about Soul Society. If it could have been done so easily, Aizen would have done it himself. What do you think Aizen Taicho was doing? He was trying to fix it, and Kurosaki killed him. Hinamori yelled. Yes, Kurosaki killed him, Hitsugaya agreed. And Kurosaki himself called it a tragedy, because there were no right answers. Aizen wanted to fix Soul Society, and Kurosaki wanted to protect his town. They both were doing what they thought was right, and Kurosaki won. Kurosaki didn't have to kill him. Hinamori screeched. And Aizen didn't have to give up immortality. Hitsugaya answered loudly, putting both hands on his friend's shoulders, desperate to make her see. You heard Kurosaki. Aizen was immortal with the Hogyoku. I watched him regenerate completely from having his chest blown open, and his head disintegrated. He could not be killed, Momo, not unless he wanted to die. Smack. Hitsugaya's head twisted, a red mark on his left cheek blooming from where Hinamori had slapped him. The Fukutecho trembled, and tears trailed their way down her face as she looked regretfully at what she had just done. You watched Kurosaki kill him, she uttered in horror. The master of ice and snow returned his eyes to those of Hinamori. Yes, he said quietly, his expression stony, and Hinamori knew she'd crossed a line. I did. How could you? She begged to know. How could you just let Aizen Taicho die? She couldn't understand it. Hitsugaya was her best friend, why couldn't he have given Aizen Taicho a chance to explain? It is unbecoming of me as a Taicho, but, my reason for letting Kurosaki kill Aizen was vengeance for almost killing you, and for tearing your heart out and trampling on it. And I would happily have done the deed myself given half a chance. Hitsugaya rose from the bed, and Hinamori could only watch, unmoving as he began walking to the door, picking up and sheathing Hyarinmaru. He paused as he reached for the handle. You've always been more important to me, Momo. But you need to see that Aizen died because he chose to, and very few will grieve his death because of his actions. I will not be one of them. And Kurosaki? Hinamori asked quietly. I have come to know Kurosaki Ichigo well during my time spent in the living world, so I say this with all confidence. He grieves for being forced to take a life, and you heard him wish that Aizen had gone about things differently, and call his death a tragedy. But Kurosaki will not regret saving his people. Hitsugaya opened the door then, and quietly left Hinamori sitting there staring where he'd been. Hana walked in a few moments later, seeing Hinamori quietly crying. I knew taking her to hear Kurisaki's speech was a bad idea, she thought to herself as she sat down. What's wrong, Hinamori-chan? Hinamori just cried harder. It was too much to bear. She'd just slapped her best friend, who insisted that Aizen Taicho wanted to die, who'd in fact watched him die, who'd said in a perfectly calm voice that he'd have killed Aizen Taicho himself if the opportunity had presented itself. Kurosaki, who had been so monstrous in the living world, had taken the time to tell all of Seoul society that Aizen Taicho was a good person, so was he really a monster? But Kurosaki had also said that Aizen Taicho had been immortal, so for Aizen Taicho to die, then Aizen Taicho had had to want to die like Shiro-chan had said, but that meant that Aizen Taicho had left her and that hurt so terribly much. And then Hinamori truly realized that she'd just slapped her best friend and suddenly an inkling of fear wriggled into her head that maybe Shiro-chan didn't want to be her best friend anymore. Hinamori clutched her head, shivering from head to toe. I don't know what's real anymore, she breathed. Is Kurosaki a monster or is he not? He threatened to rape me in the living world, but then he turns around and tells everyone that Aizen Taicho was a good person. And then I think that maybe Aizen Taicho put an illusion on me, and it's so painful for me to think that might be true. And it hurts so bad to think that Aizen Taicho wanted to die, that he could have chosen to live but didn't. And I'm afraid, Hana Taicho. Afraid of what? Hana gently pressed. I slapped Hitsugaya Taicho when he was just trying to make a point. Hinamori looked up with vision blurred by tears. I slapped him. What's wrong with me? Do I drive away everyone important to me? Of course not, Hinamori-chan. But Aizen Taicho left me, and I didn't slap him. Hinamori wailed. Hitsugaya Taicho couldn't even stand to look at me after that. He went all frigid and left. Do you want to apologize to him? Hana asked quietly. What sort of question is that? Of course I want to apologize to him. Hinamori answered, her voice watery. I didn't mean to do it, and he's my best friend, and I think I hurt him and I didn't mean to, and, she trailed off when she saw Hitsugaya re-enter the room. Hitsugaya Taicho. I saw the mark on his cheek and guessed what happened, Hana admitted. I asked him to stand outside the door and listen for a few minutes before he left. I'll give you two some privacy. Hana left the room before anyone could protest. Toshiro, I know, Momo, Hitsugaya interrupted softly. I should have expected it, now that I think about it. You've been loyal to Aizen for a long time, for anyone to suggest that Aizen was suicidal would trigger an emotional response. But don't worry, he offered a half smile. You'll have to try a lot harder than that to get rid of me. You're my best friend too, Momo. Do you really think that Aizen Taicho wanted to die? Hitsugaya nodded. Yes, I don't see how else Kurosaki could have finished him. To be honest, the Hogyoku's regenerative powers were amazing. Aizen would have had to purposely stop them to die. Hinamori swallowed hard. Was there anything I could have done differently? She questioned quietly. No, I don't think so, Momo. Hitsugaya sat down on the bed next to his best friend again. Now I have a question for you. Yes, do you feel up to seeing Kurosaki and talking to him, with me here to monitor? He's outside and wants to speak with you. Hinamori stiffened. Fear coursed through her veins, but she managed to slowly nod her head. Are you sure? The Taicho queried gently. I can deny him if you wish. No, Hinamori stammered. She took a breath to steady herself. I need to know for sure. Let him in. And so it was that a few moments later, Kurosaki Ichigo stood in the same room as Hinamori, leaving Zangetsu outside the room. He was glad to have thought of that, as Hinamori looked rather relieved to see Ichigo unarmed. Everything that Ichigo had planned to say to Aizen's old Fukutecho seemed to have vanished from his brain. He sighed. I'm sorry, I'm no good at this. I just wanted to apologize, and give you my condolences. Apologize? Hinamori echoed. Yeah, for what you heard in the living world. I mean, I know I didn't do it, but you heard it anyway, thanks to Aizen's illusions, and well, I know my Reiatsu with my mask can be frightening. Ichigo's voice had started off strong, but he ended it almost mumbling. Aizen's illusions. Ichigo blinked, then realized that Hinamori probably didn't know yet. I'm sorry, let me try to start over. Aizen put an illusion on you in the living world when you appeared so I wouldn't fight him, because he knew I wouldn't hurt an innocent. The illusion he put on you was designed to make you see me as the enemy, and Aizen told me that the illusion me threatened you. He glanced at Hitsugaya out of the corner of his eye, before deciding to just end the sentence there. So, I wanted to apologize. There wasn't a single note of deception in Kurisaki's voice, and his body language said the same. Even his reiatsu exuded remorse. But Hinamori still wasn't sure. Out of the corner of her eye, Tobiyame glinted at her. Use what you just learned. See into his innermost emotions, Tobiyame suggested in a voice that Hinamori could only just hear. Good idea, Kurosaki-san, I have a request. Name it. Please bring in your Zanpakuto, and lay the blade on my own. Ichigo nodded wordlessly, and stepped outside for a moment to retrieve Zangetsu. After coming back inside, he carefully set down the sword of his soul upon Tobiyame. What's she trying to do? Focus, Ichigo. What happens when two Zanpakuto meet? Ah, Ichigo understood now, and mentally tried to push his emotions into Zangetsu. Hinamori barely kept from gasping. Kurosaki was far more powerful than Toshiro, and she was getting very strong feelings that seemed to almost reverberate into her being. She felt sorrow, she felt pity, and confidence, and determination that could shatter dimensions. She felt worry, and weariness, but nowhere did she feel a hint of falsehood. Kurosaki was telling the truth. She couldn't bear it anymore, and withdrew Tobiyame, her hands shaking slightly. Kurosaki had such powerful emotions. Hinamori felt ashamed of herself, not only for thinking Kurosaki a monster just earlier that day, but for once again feeling wetness gathering in her eyes. She'd never cried so much in a single day, and it was scarcely half over. But Hinamori could not help it. If Kurosaki was telling the truth, then Aizen Taicho had truly put her under an illusion, and betrayed her once again. She didn't know what to feel anymore. Should I feel relieved that Kurosaki isn't out to get me? Or hurt that Aizen Taicho put me under an illusion and made me fear Kurosaki so? Should I feel ashamed that I've put so many people through so much, or happy that I have such good friends? In the end, she just felt drained. Why are you apologizing to me? Hinamori found herself asking. I should be the one apologizing to you. I disobeyed orders, was swayed by Aizen Taicho. I attacked you. Ichigo wasn't really sure what to say to that. It was nothing. Sounded like an insult to Hinamori's skills, which was not what he wanted to say, despite how ineffectual her attacks had been to him in the living world. But Ichigo couldn't just let Hinamori apologize to him, either, or he'd feel like a huge jerk. He finally settled with, you attacked me because you were threatened, and Aizen had just proven himself in your eyes. No apologies needed. Hinamori had no idea what to say either. She was so emotionally tired, and needed time to deal with the revelations. She settled with, thank you. I also wanted to offer my condolences about Aizen, Ichigo murmured. I heard he was your Taicho and rather important to you. I'll try to stay out of your way in the future. I imagine looking at me is hard, given what happened. I hope you get better soon. He picked up Zangetsu and began to make his way out. The Fukutecho suddenly realized that she had one more question she was dying to ask. Kurosaki-san. Yeah, do you think Aizen Taicho would be satisfied with the way things turned out? Hinamori asked. Now that the Central 46, who he had the most problems with, is going to spend a very long time fixing the rest of Soul Society. Yeah, I think he would be. Ichigo gave her a tiny assuring smile. It might not be the way he had envisioned everything getting fixed, but I think he'd be happy that it's being worked on. Hinamori returned the smile gratefully. Thank you, Kurosaki-san. If Kurosaki, who Shiro-chan said would know him best now, thinks Aizen Taicho would be happy with the results, then I think I can be too. I'm going to miss you terribly, Aizen Taicho, but I think now I can start to move on. Ichigo stepped out quietly, followed by Hitsugaya, and encountered Unohana listening quietly at the door. Thank you, Kurosaki-san, the healer said, the corners of her lips upturned. You've helped far more than you know. Don't you see, Kurosaki? Hitsugaya queried exasperatedly. You convinced her that you were telling the truth, and she doesn't seem to fear you anymore. Oh, well, Glad to help. Ichigo kept walking towards the door. I believe she could work with you now, Hitsugaya told him pointedly, keeping pace. I'll be glad of that if she gets stationed to the living world, but I understand she's needed for her division, since it has no Taicho, the substitute replied, purposely ignoring Hitsugaya's blatant hints. Kurosaki, you are not unintelligent. Why are you avoiding the question of whether you are interested in the 5th Division Taicho position? You must be aware by now that you are being considered for it. Hitsugaya bluntly pointed out. Because I am not sure I want to become a Taicho of Soul Society, Ichigo answered steadily. I still have a life to live, Toshiro. Hitsugaya sighed, cutting himself off. He'd never get through to Kurosaki, so why even bother? I suppose I can see your point. They reached the door and opened it. Ichigo blanched and quickly closed it again upon seeing and hearing what he swore must have the majority of the female Shinigami population. Not to mention, I don't think I could deal with the fangirls. Hitsugaya looked at him unsympathetically, but privately amused. That's an occupational hazard of being out of the ordinary, he stated matter-of-factly. Best to learn how to deal with them now, they'll only get worse if you disappear for too long. Ichigo would have scowled at the short Taicho, but was too busy trying to figure out another way to leave. Luckily for him, Unohana took pity on the young man and cleared her throat to get his attention. We do have another exit just that way, she commented lightly, and her smile broadened when she saw the vizard dashing in that direction. Now then, Hitsugaya Taicho, I do believe we need to have words with Kyoraku Taicho. Yes, we do, Hitsugaya agreed. He was not looking forward to how large the paperwork would grow from taking on some of the Central 46's work. A half hour and a trip through the Senkaimon later, Ichigo once more stood in Karakura. He sighed and began making his way to school so he could retake his body. Assuming Kyoraku's plan works, then I won't need to worry about Soul Society coming to kill me. Then I just need to focus on living, I guess. But what do I want out of life? The answer to that was simple, yet profound. I want to live a life with happiness, and to die with no regrets. Ichigo remembered something his father had said immediately after the Vizard's fight with the Grand Fisher, shortly after gaining Rukia's Shinigami powers. Live well, age well and go bald well, and die after me. And if you can, die smiling. If I can't, I won't be able to face Masaki. It was one of the times that Ichigo acknowledged that his father was a wise man, despite his usual overenthusiastic actions. But at the time, he hadn't fully understood all the implications of Isshin's words. Live well, age well, and go bald well, huh? Ichigo muttered softly. It felt strange, thinking about the future as he was. Ichigo was used to living in the moment, occasionally making plans for days and weeks ahead, but not years. That was the way he'd been before he'd become a Shinigami, before he'd gotten caught up in the war. During the war, he'd had to start planning and thinking about the future, judging the pros and cons of each decision. The war changed me, the Vizard realized somberly, unsure if he liked this change. You are simply more aware of cause and effect, Zangetsu murmured. It is a natural effect of growing more mature. Ichigo sighed again as the school came into sight. I can't wait for that vacation. It'll be nice to just relax. Right now though, I need to see how school went with Kon. His eyes shot wide open as he suddenly remembered that Kon was in his body. Flickering into Shunpo, he materialized right by his body inside his classroom, startling his friends. Ignoring that, Ichigo quickly gave his body a brief once-over. No bruises, no cuts or anything. His body appeared unharmed. I've been good, Kon swore quietly, looking at the true owner of the body he was in defiantly. Ichigo sighed in relief. Thanks, Kon. Sorry, I don't have your lion body with me, but I really do need to get back in my body so I can handle the rest of school. Fine, fine. Pushing his Shinigami badge against Kon's head, Kon's natural green pill came out. Catching it before it could hit the floor, Ichigo slid into his body easily and subtly shifted Kon into his pocket. Then he began trying to catch up on what he'd missed, using Kon's notes. Wait, Kon took notes. Ichigo looked again. To his astonishment, the constantly irritating Mod Soul had indeed taken notes for Ichigo, and they made sense. Then he noticed Kon had also left a message written down at the top of the paper. Ichigo, I'm taking these notes for you just so you aren't stuck inside all day trying to make sense of it. It's not healthy, I tell you. You need to get yourself a girl and have some fun. And in return for this, I want to come along on that vacation of yours so I can see Rukia-ne. Ichigo smirked. No wonder he didn't get into trouble today. Alright, Kon, you've earned it. His better mood was ruined, however, as soon as school ended for the day. He was immediately cornered by his friends, including Keigo, Tatsuki and Mizuhiro. Though he hadn't been asked any questions yet, Ichigo sighed and began explaining. I was asked to join Soul Society today as one of their Taicho, to replace Aizen. Ishida scowled and began to turn away. Did you accept? Chad asked simply. No. The Quincy blinked and looked at Ichigo questioningly. Why not? Why is everyone asking me that? Ichigo demanded, losing his temper. Does everyone expect me to just turn my back on everyone here? Karakura is far more important to me than Soul Society. Ishida looked at him evenly. Because it might have been the only way for you to protect us. The Vizard deflated, seeing the archer's point. I didn't become a Taicho because it's smarter for me to stay here. So why'd you go to Soul Society, then? Inoue queried innocently. The biggest problem for us was the Central 46, Ichigo began. They're the ones in charge in peacetime, and they're the ones who ordered the Vizard executed. Between the Gote 13 and the Central 46, the 46 are the more xenophobic. Hiraku asked me to come with him to help him disable their ability to order the Gote 13 to kill us. Why would they kill us? Inoue gasped. They're friends. Ichigo groaned. Damn it, I forgot she didn't know. It's all politics, Inoue. We're friends with the enforcers, not the guys who make the rules, the Central 46. To the Central 46, we're too powerful to let live unless we work for them. You reject reality. I'm a Vizard. Ishida's a Quincy and verbally declares Shinigami to be his enemy. Chad has hollow-like powers. We're as far from them as we can be. They don't have any reason to like us, and we have the potential to cripple them militarily. Simply put, they fear us, Ishida put it succinctly, pushing his glasses up his nose and making them flash. And as we've learned in history, humans have a tendency of killing that which they fear and don't understand. But, Inoue looked at the pair of rivals in shock and disbelief. No, I can't believe that our friends would try to kill us. Just like Byakuya didn't try to kill Rukia despite her being his sister. Ichigo reminded her darkly. Allies in Soul Society would likely defend us, yes, Ishida admitted. But that in turn would spark a civil war, because not everyone would agree. Exactly, the Vizard concurred. So it was better to cut off the Central 46 entirely so our friends would be the ones in charge. How do you do that? Keigo asked curiously. I mean, if the Central 46 is the government, what could you have done? Ichigo looked rather sheepish, and rubbed the back of his neck. Well, apparently I'm sorta famous. How famous? Ishida questioned mercilessly, not noticing Inoue start paying very close attention. What exactly did you do, Kurosaki? Ichigo sighed and looked at the Quincy resignedly. I told Aizen's life story. All of what I knew and all that I suspected. To what looked like just about everyone in the Seraiti. Huh, everyone asked together. Everyone in the Seraiti. Inoue whispered in a stammer. But, no. How do you know so much about Aizen? Tatsuki inquired, confused. You two were enemies, right? Is it some Shinigami power or something? Something like that for some of it. Other parts I've picked up here and there, the Vizard admitted. Anyway, Hiraku took advantage of my speech and passed a law that forces the Central 46 to take care of the problems that led Aizen to rebel before they can address other issues. It'll take them, say, until we're all dead and gone to finish. Ichigo thoroughly enjoyed the looks of shocked silence for a few seconds before turning and walking away with a smirk on his face. I'm getting some ice cream. You all coming? Chapter 39. Start of a vacation. The remaining days until Ichigo's vacation passed quickly, which the substitute Shinigami was very glad for. The knowledge that he would soon be able to relax comfortably on a nice, warm beach, with his closest friends and confidants, made him decidedly eager for the day to arrive. Much to his relief, Soul Society had not initiated any other form of contact with him, and the hollows that made their way to Karakura were weak enough for even that Kurumadani Zenisuke, the Shinigami that Soul Society had officially stationed in Karakura, to finish off with some effort. To be honest, Ichigo had anticipated stronger hollows. He'd only forbidden Maino's class hollows from entering Karakura, and there were plenty of very strong hollows that had not reached the level of Jillian. The Grand Fisher was an excellent example. He'd killed humans and Shinigami for half a century prior to his death, and had never reached Jillian. Ichigo wasn't about to look a gift horse in the mouth. Even so, he couldn't help but feel uneasy, as if it were simply the calm before the storm. No matter, Urahara and Yoruichi can take care of anything that happens here. He paused from his packing, took a deep breath and let it out slowly, letting tension drain from his muscles. Yeah, everything'll be fine. It's okay. I mean, who would attack Karakura while I'm gone? Aizen's dead, and every hollow strong enough to be a threat to Urahara and Yoruichi are being kept in line by Ulquiorra, Nell and the others. He nodded to himself, slightly reassured, and resumed packing. Ichigo done the majority of the packing the night before, and was simply double-checking everything. Finishing, he nodded again, satisfied, and picked up his luggage. Finally, Khan exclaimed, jumping up from the floor in his lion plush body and landing on Ichigo's bed. So, what's the plan, Ichigo? The wizard blinked. He'd forgotten to tell Khan exactly what the vacation consisted of. We meet everyone at the airport in a couple of hours. Urahara's arranged a flight for us to a popular beachside hotel, with 3 rooms reserved until next Monday, Ichigo summarized. I'm probably going to be with Renji in one room, with Chad and Ishida in the next room and the girls in the last. What about me? Khan demanded. Don't worry, you're coming too, Ichigo reassured the mod soul. As for what room, well, I gotta admit, you've been helpful for me in school, and haven't gotten my body beat up in a while, Ichigo conceded. So, as a thank you, if you can convince Rukia and Inoue, you can stay with them. If you can't, you'll stay in my room. And as an added bonus, as long as you don't do any perverted stunts in front of me, or that in any way can be linked to me, I won't do anything to stop you. Khan looked at him with comically large, teary grateful eyes. You're a good person, he whispered, just before leaping forward and latching onto Ichigo's chest in an unmistakable attempt to hug him. Oi, oi, Ichigo protested. Off, I'm still using this shirt. Meanwhile, Ishida was thinking along similar lines to his wizard rival. He was double-checking everything one last time, but he too had something more to consider. He'd been thinking about a way to help protect Karakura without his Quincy abilities for days now, and the teenager wanted to tell the others, and hopefully acquire their support. Ishida could tell that Inoue would want to use her unique restorative abilities to heal those who could not be healed with modern medicine. She had a healer's disposition. Likewise, Kurosaki seemed unable to not help those who needed it. Chad seemed as though he could return to living normally if he so chose, but Ishida thought it unlikely he ever would. He would use his arms, and his powers, to protect someone if they were ever needed. Ishida had spent his spare time working on the details for his idea, and he was fairly confident that it could work. And if it did, it would provide his comrades the ability to protect Karakura spiritually without inevitably losing their jobs to save someone's life, as well as giving them the ability to quietly use their powers to help. Ishida's idea was simply this: found a new business that focused on using their abilities in productive ways. Chad and Kurosaki could be used as bodyguards, for example, or as teachers in self-defense. Ishida privately thought that Chad would probably enjoy the latter job. In such a position, Kurosaki could just ingest his mod soul to take his place as bodyguard while out slaying hollows should the need arise. Inoue's Soden Kishun was incredibly versatile, and could theoretically be used for anything from restoring a priceless painting to healing the terminally ill. As for Ishida himself, he would be the one advertising and doing much of the administrative work, while perhaps putting his tailoring talents to good use. He had been complimented many times about the quality of his work. All said and told, Ishida was certain that if it worked, they would all be content with their lives. The problem was communicating his vision to the others. He'd realized during his time figuring it all out that he didn't really know what the others wanted to do with their lives just yet. For all he knew, Kurosaki might want to put his fighting past behind him and take over his father's clinic. Chad perhaps would choose to be an engineer of some sort. Inoue, maybe a bakery. Ishida paused to shudder at the thought. Inoe's tastes were extremely strange and anything she cooked was hard for anyone save Inoue herself to swallow. The ex-Quincy sighed. He'd already resolved to tell the others by the end of the vacation. He just couldn't help but hope that things worked out. Noticing the time, he picked up his luggage, stepped outside, and vanished in a burst of Harenkyaku. Smirking to himself as he streaked across the sky, Ishida couldn't help but think. Just maintaining my skills, San, need to practice, after all. Several minutes later, Ishida landed in a quiet, secluded place very near the airport, and began walking purposefully towards the entrance when he felt a very familiar presence land just where he'd been a moment ago. I see I'm not the only one using their power to get around, Kurosaki observed with a smirk that could be heard quite clearly. Certainly saves us the cost of gas or a taxi. Agreed, Ishida concurred, pausing until Kurosaki reached him before he began making his way towards the airport again. Kurosaki fell in step with him easily. Of course, we won't be able to do it forever. Society will become suspicious if we are able to travel quickly without a recognized method of doing so. Kurosaki sighed in lament. Yeah, that sucks, but at least it's good for emergencies. True. They continued walking. After another minute or two, Ishida decided that it was probably best to simply ask the question that was on his mind. What are your plans for the future, Kurosaki? Aizen's gone. You seem to have handled Soul Society so they won't be bothering us much. Kurosaki's tilted his head to the sky searchingly, as if asking Kami for the answers. I haven't decided. I want to finish school, of course. Find a job I can enjoy, have a family. Same as any other guy, I guess. Don't you have a job lined up with your father's clinic? Ishida prodded coolly, keeping his tone carefully neutral. Kurosaki snorted amusedly. Could you honestly see me as a doctor or healer or anything? Honestly, perhaps, Ishida answered truthfully. Well, maybe. What about you? The substitute replied. Your father is the director of the Karakura hospital, right? You're good at sewing things up quickly. Would you want to be a surgeon or something? You're definitely smart enough to get through medical school. Ishida blinked. He'd never thought about that possibility. Considering it for a few moments, he shook his head negatively. I don't believe I'd enjoy that kind of work. My abilities with a needle are more crafted towards tailoring. Are you thinking about opening a clothing shop then? Custom work. It has crossed my mind, Ishida admitted. But I have, shall we say, a slightly higher ambition. The wizard turned to look at the Quincy quizzically. Higher than opening and owning your own shop? Yes. Kurosaki paused for a few moments, waiting for Ishida to continue. When Ishida said nothing more, he pressed on. Are you going to tell me what it is? Not yet. Figures. There was no rancor behind the words, merely acceptance, with a hint of amusement. The two reached the doors to the airport and quietly walked in, seeing everyone already there. Ishida-kun. Kurosaki-kun. Inoue greeted enthusiastically, waving. She had donned a sundress for the day, this one an orange-red color, matching her hair nicely. Chad merely nodded acknowledgement. He had decided on a black sleeveless shirt, and jeans for his trip there, Ichigo observed as he nodded back. Hey, Ichigo, Renji commented, raising a hand in hello. He was dressed in a tropical-themed shirt, with palm trees decorating it, and tan shorts. As a result, his tattoos stood out quite prominently, and he was getting a lot of attention from those around him, not all of it good. Rukia, like Inoue, had chosen a sundress, though hers was a bright yellow. Ichigo, Ishida, she welcomed with a smile. Looking forward to the beach. You have no idea, Ichigo agreed. I see everyone's arrived. Urahara greeted, walking in the doors. All right then, here are your tickets. After passing out the tickets, he passed Ichigo a phone. Just in case something drastic happens that you'd want to know about, or if you just feel like talking to your family again, he assured the substitute. We definitely won't give out your number to anyone. Ichigo nodded. It was an appreciated gift. Thanks, Urahara. Urahara smiled and tipped his head, his hat casting a shadow on the rest of his face. See you when you get back. Have a safe flight, and do try not to attract any more trouble. Not exactly my fault, you know, the wizard retorted, but he nodded anyway. My work here is done. Yane. Urahara turned on his heel and began walking away. Ishida looked up at the flight boards and coughed lightly, getting everyone's attention. We don't have much time, he noted. We should get going. Yama-jii, Hiraku exclaimed as he walked into the Sotaicho's room. You're awake. Yamamoto turned and looked at him with slightly open, very serious eyes. Hiraku Taicho, report. Hi, while you've been incapacitated, there have been a number of events. Jin Ichimaru has been reinstated as Taicho, with several restrictions to serve as punishment. Similarly, Tosen Kanami has also been reinstated. What are the restrictions you've implemented? Due to the motives behind his betrayal, it was decided that Jin be given some leniency as he had been working to find Aizen's weakness and kill him. Jin has been placed under house arrest during all times that he is not performing his duties as Taicho for the next year. He will be working without pay for the next 5 years, and his Reiatsu will be bound for 3 years by the 12th Division so that 50% of his power is sealed. Hira will be submitting weekly reports on Jin's actions, to be verified through the Onmitsukido. Tosen has been vouched for by Komamura Taicho, but as his betrayal did not serve a more noble cause, his restrictions are stricter. He has been placed under house arrest and will be working without pay for the next 5 years. After that, his pay will resume at a reduced rate. His Reiatsu will be bound by 80% for the next decade. All of his decisions will need to be approved by another Taicho and Hisagi. Neither Tosen nor Jin will have the right to vote at the Taicho meetings without approval from their Fukuteicho as well. Yamamoto made a noncommittal grunt as acknowledgement. What of Hinamori Fukuteicho? She has recovered fully, and has resumed her duties as leader of the 5th Division. And Kurosaki Ichigo? Hiraku glanced at a nearby clock. By now, I'd say he's on his way to his vacation. Yamamoto blinked, before narrowing his eyes to slits. Explain. In detail, Shunsui. Hiraku sighed. At my request, Kurosaki made an appearance in Soul Society and made a speech concerning Aizen and the causes of his deception and eventual betrayal. I used the opportunity as acting Sotaicho to assign Central 46 the task of creating functional justice systems for each of the Rukongai districts to eliminate the problems that created Aizen to begin with. The Gotei 13 will handle any other critical issues until they have finished, thereby largely eliminating the possibility of conflict between the Central 46 and Kurosaki Ichigo. That completed, Kurosaki decided to take the opportunity to go on a vacation. He invited Abarai Renji and Kuchiki Rukia to go with him, and both of them accepted. I see, Yamamoto murmured as he considered what he'd heard. He truly didn't like the idea of essentially usurping the power from the established government, but he also couldn't fault Hiraku on attempting to keep the peace. The Central 46 had a history of anti-Vizard tendencies. Simultaneously fixing some of the issues that had caused the problems to begin with was simply icing on the cake. However, it also meant that Kurosaki remained in political limbo, which was not a position that Yamamoto desired. Still, better that than outright enemies. Mentally nodding to himself, Yamamoto decided that Hiraku had performed adequately, especially as he had regained Jin and Tosen as Taicho. They would serve as extra power in the event that Kurosaki turned on them, which was entirely possible with the number of strong allies he had thus far acquired. Very well, he finally said. When is Kurosaki Ichigo due to return? Reports indicate 1 week. Have you scouted for candidates for Taicho of the 5th Division? Hi, Hiraku confirmed. 2 Fukuteicho have Bankai that we know of, Abarai Renji and Madarame Akaku. Madarame refuses to leave Zaraki Taicho's division. Abarai has expressed no opinion one way or another, but has continued training despite Aizen's recent defeat, so I believe he would be willing. However, Kuchiki Taicho has requested that he not be promoted just yet, claiming that Abarai is not yet ready to handle the full responsibility of a division. I and a few other Taicho have approached Kurosaki Ichigo, but he declined in favor of living his human life, the easygoing Taicho finished. Yamamoto nodded, pleased at his student's thoroughness. Has anything else of note occurred? Kuritsuchi Taicho wants to see you soon. Something regarding a rare event and some classified information that he wants you to divulge. Soifun Taicho has had her Onmitsukido quietly scouring Karakura, but they are unable to determine where the Vizard are located. And one other thing that might be interesting, since the day after Aizen's defeat, no Mainos of any rank have arrived in Karakura. Kuritsuchi Taicho detected that Kurosaki entered a Garganta to Haweko Mundo that day, and Soifun Taicho believes that Kurosaki went hunting to drastically reduce the Jillian population. Yamamoto turned the latest piece of news over in his head before deciding he would need to think it over in more detail later. Good. Now, tell me the details. How did Kurosaki Ichigo defeat Aizen after I was incapacitated? Oh boy. Hiraku knew instantly that he was not going to like this conversation. Ichigo stepped outside the cab that he and his friends had taken from the airport, which Urahara had thoughtfully paid for, and laid eyes on where they would be staying for the next week. It was an enormous, sandy white painted hotel with cheerful decorations. The beach and ocean were mere minutes away, and he could see dozens of people there having a good time. Despite himself, Ichigo felt a smile tugging on his lips. It was a beautiful sight, and best of all, he couldn't sense a single Reiatsu signature outside of his group. He could feel himself relaxing by the second. Just what the doctor ordered, he thought happily, allowing his customary scowl to fade into a tiny smile. Ishida, who was walking beside the substitute Shinigami and could therefore see his face, was surprised by Kurosaki's uncharacteristically almost cheerful expression, but said nothing. He couldn't claim to know everything about Kurosaki. Perhaps this was a facet Ishida merely hadn't had a chance to view before. It wasn't as though he knew what Kurosaki liked to do in his free time. The wizard had had precious little time to spend enjoying himself recently. The six of them approached the front counter inside the hotel, with Ichigo and Ishida at the front. It seemed safest. Chad was too quiet and intimidating, Inoue was too random and tended to drift off into a daydream given a strange thought, and Renji had poor social skills and too many openly visible tattoos. Rukia would have been a good choice to talk to the attendant, being of a noble house and having lived in the living world for quite some time with Ichigo, but she was too busy being in awe of the beautiful scenery and was sketching in her drawing pad. "Can I help you?" the attendant, an attractive woman with long blonde hair, asked politely. "We should have a reservation here under the name of Urahara," Ishida replied. The attendant looked at her computer screen and scanned through the list of the day's arrivals. "Ah, yes, 3 rooms have been reserved. Have you decided the rooming arrangements?" Inoue and Rukia were by each other's side in an instant, being the obvious pair as they were the only girls. The males glanced at each other, before Ishida made a swift decision and stood next to Chad, leaving Renji and Ichigo to room together. All in all, it was exactly as Ichigo had predicted earlier that day to Kon. "Yes," Ishida answered. The attendant nodded in acceptance. "Very well. In your rooms are guides for the activities that we host on a day-to-day basis. Urahara-san has also paid for all food and drink while you are here, including unlimited room service. There are menus in your rooms detailing what we have available at any given time, and how to order it. While Urahara-san has additionally purchased unlimited alcoholic drinks, remember that the legal drinking age is 20, and we reserve the right to ask for proof of age. Do you have any questions?" Receiving a round of negative headshakes in return, she nodded. "Should you have questions later, feel free to talk to information service over there." She pointed across the hallway, where the desk was clearly labeled, and then turned around. Selecting 3 keys, she passed them out to the pairs of roomies before another, this time male, attendant walked up to them with a smile. "I will escort you to your rooms. If you'll follow me." Several minutes later, "I call the bed by the window," Ichigo claimed the instant the attendant had left, jumping over to it and setting his luggage atop the bed before Renji could say anything. He wanted to be able to see the stars as he fell asleep. Damn, Renji cursed. He'd wanted that one. A room over, Chad and Ishida glanced at each other. "Do you have a preference?" the Quincy asked politely, not much caring which bed he used. "Not particularly." After a moment's consideration, the gentle giant set his things on the bed closer to the door and began searching for his swim trunks. Shrugging, Ishida did the same. Across the hall, Inoue had chosen the bed by the window, appreciating the scenery. Rukia didn't mind. It was rather comforting to have the bed closer to the exit. It reminded her fondly of living in Ichigo's closet, as she was just near enough to feel his reiatsu without effort. He's gotten better at controlling it, she thought to herself with a mixture of pride, relief, and a bit of wistfulness. She half missed the days where his reiatsu washed over her like a protective blanket. Ichigo's gotten pretty strong, hasn't he? Inoue stopped looking through her clothes for the swimsuit she wanted, instead turning to look at Rukia with a smile. Yes, he has. I'm glad things turned out the way they did, the petite Shinigami said earnestly, facing Inoue. Ichigo's strong enough to protect everyone now, the way he always wanted. And now that Aizen's dead, he can focus on other things. She smirked knowingly. Like romance. Inoue's eyes grew wide as saucers, a slight blush staining her cheeks. I don't know what you're talking about, she denied, shoving her face into her clothes as she resumed the search for her swimsuit. Right, Rukia acknowledged disbelievingly. So you don't mind at all that Ichigo has fangirls in Soul Society? Inoue's efforts grew a touch more aggressive as she began throwing her clothes all over the place. Ha, found it, she crowed. Rukia took one look and raised an eyebrow. Right, you're totally not trying to get a man. Kurosaki Masaki was at her home in the West First District, where Urahara had dropped her off after taking her from her still-living family. The nice man had explained all about the varying levels of law and chaos in the districts, before asking her to stay there. Flashback. This is one of the houses I own under a false name, Urahara explained sheepishly. But I want you to have it. It's the least I can do for having you and your family caught in this situation. I'm partly at fault. Thank you, Masaki told him sincerely. I'll admit, I have ulterior motives. Living here means you'll be very close to the Seraiti, so it won't be hard for you to get a hold of a Shinigami if you need help. It also means it's unlikely you'll get hurt or killed, since Shinigami patrol here frequently, and that means Ichigo won't kill me, Urahara admitted with a smirk. Masaki picked up a hint of actual nervousness, but decided not to say anything. Urahara was doing her a favor, after all. End flashback. The house was actually quite nice, and was already furnished. It was about the size of her home in Karakura, so sometimes Masaki felt as though it was too large for just her, but she knew that when it came time for her children to pass on, it meant they'd always have a place to stay. Masaki had spent the last few days going around the neighborhood, meeting the people and getting a feel for how life worked after death. Not much had changed, it seemed. People still ate if they felt hungry, which was apparently somewhat uncommon for most, and there were dojos, shrines, blacksmiths, everything Masaki could think of. She'd had a couple of visitors, mostly other women welcoming her into the community, but she'd kept to herself a lot. Masaki simply wasn't sure what to do with her afterlife. She knew that she couldn't enter the Seraiti and join the Shinigami Academy unless she had spiritual power, and Masaki hadn't felt hungry since she arrived. Thirsty, yes, but not hungry. In the meantime, Masaki was reading an interesting novel that she'd found in the house, when a knock on the door interrupted her. I'm coming, she called out, rising from the couch and moving towards the door. Opening it, she was greeted by an unfamiliar face. The visitor was male, tall, and well-shaven with short but styled hair. His clothes were somewhat more elegant than most she'd seen, and he carried a sword at his hip. Kurosaki-san. Yes, the man smiled. My name is Pound Miro. It's a pleasure to meet you. I've been sent by the Barin family to discuss a proposition. The Barin family? Masaki questioned. I'm sorry, I haven't been in Soul Society very long. Pound nodded in understanding. The Barin family is what is known as a noble house. They play a part in the government and society in general. Sometimes, they can have special roles. For instance, the Kuchiki are charged with maintaining the history of Soul Society, and the Shihoin are responsible for protecting some ancient artifacts, as well as heading a special military unit. The Kasumioji are masters at forging weapons. You get the idea. What does the Barin family do? Pound chuckled self-deprecatingly. I can't really tell you, as I don't know myself. I've asked, but I'm told that it's a secret that only the heads of the family know. Is that common? For many noble families, yes, Pound confirmed. Only the really big-name families have well-known duties, as they get called on it frequently enough that it's common knowledge. I see, so, you came here with a proposition? Masaki asked curiously. Ah, yes, the Barin family has requested your presence. They need some information from you concerning your son, Kurosaki Ichigo. It has something to do with their role as a noble house, so I wasn't allowed to ask what they want. Surely you have some idea, Masaki prodded. Pound looked both ways and leaned in conspiratorially. I think it has something to do with how he became so powerful since he started out human. My working theory is that the Barine family is responsible for recording knowledge of new hybrids, so they know what can happen. I've been with them for decades and this is the first thing they've done to fulfill their role that I know of. Your guess is as good as mine. Oh, Pound exclaimed. I almost forgot to mention. In exchange for your information, they are offering unlimited access to the Seraiti as well as a list of names and addresses of your son's known contacts, so you can have easier access to your family's lives. Masaki's eyes widened and focused on Pound intently. Are you serious? She asked quietly. Perfectly. Between you and me, I'd take it, Pound advised. It's one hell of an offer. Ichigo's mother had to agree. Turning over the idea one more time in her head, she couldn't find a reason not to. So she smiled and nodded. All right. Pound smiled back. Great. Are you busy now? I can come back later. No, now's a good time. Then let's be off. Chapter 40. Preparatory Decisions. Yamamoto's eyes were, not wide, but certainly far more open than Kiraku had seen them in centuries. You were telling me that Kurisaki's Reiatsu grew even stronger. That his strength now transcends our understanding and he can no longer be sensed reliably. Yes, Kiraku confirmed, though he does not seem to keep it in its transcended state regularly. During my visit to the living world, he could be sensed easily the entire time. Maybe he can only do it when he's in Bankai. Yamamoto mulled it over. Would you call him a match for yourself? Depends on the game Kaden Kyokutsu decides on, and how quickly Kurosaki Ichigo catches on, Kiraku stated bluntly. And myself, sir, I believe that is one of the questions that are on every Taicho's mind. And Kurosaki is on vacation. Yamamoto repeated to clarify. Yes, for another week. What sort of leverage do we have? Kiraku looked troubled by the question, but answered regardless. We don't. Yamamoto looked at Kiraku, his eyes narrow but still open, conveying his seriousness. Explain. The normally perpetually cheerful Taicho looked back just as seriously. Kurosaki has a number of friends here in the Gote 13 as you know. But targeting even one of them will put the rest up in arms and lead to open rebellion. His mother is the only one that you could possibly target and make disappear discreetly, but I warn you that if you do and Kurosaki finds out, we will find out who is stronger between you and Kurosaki, because he will come at us with everything he's got. The old man's Reiatsu rose slightly. Soul Society will not bow to one mortal's whim, he mandated sternly. One man cannot outweigh the whole of the afterlife. I don't know about you, Yama-jii, but I'm getting very tired of that argument, Kiraku stated calmly, weathering his sensei's spiritual presence with ease, being accustomed to it. Can't we just live and let live? Kurosaki Ichigo has done nothing wrong, and I'm telling you, a preemptive strike will only create a war that I'm not certain we can win. Besides, Kurosaki doesn't seem like he wants to rule everything. He even said so to Aizen in his fight. I already am a kami of world, myself, and that is all I wish to rule. HMPH. Yamamoto scoffed disbelievingly. Power corrupts astonishingly quickly, Shunsui, and he is only human. I don't think you can say, only, anything about Kurosaki Ichigo, Yama-jii. I have seen far too many examples of too much power making its wielder go mad, Shunsui, to be able to ignore the warning signs. Soul Society will prepare for the eventuality of Kurosaki Ichigo becoming an enemy. For the record, I think you're making a mistake. Off the record, I dearly hope you are right, Shunsui. I truly do. Dressed in sky blue swim trunks and white button-up t-shirt which he left open, Ichigo breathed in deeply, savoring the salty scent of ocean air and the feeling of sunlight warming his body. This is what it means to live, he thought to himself serenely, looking out at the ocean and watching the waves. He'd let Kon out of the baggage, and Ichigo really didn't want to know what Kon was doing, though he suspected the mod soul was simply spying on all the scantily clad women on the beach. Oi, Ichigo, get your head out of the clouds. We need you over here. Renji called out. He had chosen to wear simply some red swim trunks, exposing the large set of tattoos across his chest and back. Ichigo shook his head, bringing himself back to the present. What's going on? Volleyball game, 3-on-3, Renji summarized quickly. You, Chad and Inoue against Ishida, Rukia and me. You game. Sure, why not? Jogging over, Ichigo was slightly surprised when he saw Inoue's outfit. Normally, the quiet young woman leaned towards somewhat conservative two-piece bikinis, but it seemed she'd branched out today. Instead of a top that was almost immune from accidents, where the wide straps reached both over Inoue's shoulder and around to her back from both cuffs, this one was held merely by strings reaching behind her and tied manually into a knot. Wonder what changed. Who cares? She looks nice. Taking a quick glance around, Ichigo noted that Inoue was getting some appreciative looks, but thankfully no one was pulling at Chizuru and molesting her. Deciding not to draw unnecessary attention to Inoue's change of swimwear, and figuring it was none of his business anyway, Ichigo approached his friend on their side of the volleyball net. "You ready, Inoue?" "Yep," she responded cheerfully. "Chad." The gentle giant merely nodded. Ishida adjusted his glasses with a smirk. He'd chosen tan shorts and a white button-up t-shirt as well, which he kept closed. "Sheer power won't win the day here, Kurosaki. This is a game that requires finesse and precision, which you sorely lack." "We'll see about that," Ichigo retorted amiably, getting ready. "Our serve," Rukia called, snatching the ball and moving in position, her ocean blue one-piece swimsuit serving as a nice contrast to the bright colors of the beach. Throwing the ball high into the air, she leapt up and spiked it between Ichigo and Inoue. "I got it," Inoue claimed, moving to intercept and catching it on her forearms, bouncing at a much smaller height to set her teammates up for their move. The volleyball was tapped by Ichigo next, sending it near the net. Chad moved forward and powered the ball down, but Ishida had apparently anticipated this, as he managed to bounce the ball back to the side towards Renji. "Hey, you're done, Rukia, on it." The ice user leapt high in the air, above Renji and heading towards the net. The tattooed Shinigami sent the ball flying up towards her at high speed, where it was promptly spiked at an unguarded corner. Inoue lunged for it and failed, and Rukia's team scored their first point. Rukia and Renji high-fived before whirling on Ichigo smugly. "You can't beat our teamwork," the tattooed redhead boasted. Ichigo grinned in a manner reminiscent of his inner hollow, fiercely enjoying the friendly competition. "Be ready to eat your words when we win." Half an hour later, Renji clapped the wizard on the back, having won solidly by 6 points. "Good game, Ichigo." Yeah, you win this time," Ichigo grumbled good-naturedly as the 6 of them meandered to a nice spot on the beach that as yet was untaken. Inoue and Rukia set down their towels there and lay on them, content to take the opportunity to work on their tans. Ishida had brought along a rather large book and a portable parasol, which he promptly set up before sitting down in the shade and flipping through the book to where he'd left off. Deciding to go for a swim, Ichigo stripped off his shirt and set it on his own towel nearby. But as he began to make his way down to the water, Renji stopped him with an amused look. "Got a tattoo, Ichigo?" The substitute Shinigami blinked confusedly as suddenly all of his friend's attention was on him. That tattoo there, above your heart. Did you think we wouldn't see it?" Renji mocked. Ichigo glanced down, and he immediately understood. The twin crescent moons that kept a large portion of his Reiatsu sealed away, one black, one white, forming a circle. He rubbed the back of his neck embarrassedly. "Ah, yeah. Well, what is it supposed to be?" Rukia asked, intrigued as she got up and inspected Ichigo's chest. She'd never pegged Ichigo as the type to get such a permanent body marking, unlike Renji who took pride in them. After a few seconds, she suddenly recognized the symbols. Crescent moons. But why one black and one white? "One for Zangetsu, one for Cazador de la Luna," Ichigo muttered, looking away. "I'm going for a swim. See you in a bit." He stalked off, in a decidedly less happy mood than he had been a few minutes ago. He hadn't wanted to be reminded of the seal, because that led to thoughts about why he needed it, and the knowledge that if he wasn't careful he could accidentally disintegrate someone, or even himself, was hardly a cheerful thought. What was that about?" Renji questioned, bewildered. Rukia bit her lip hesitantly. Do you think maybe it's his way of grieving?" "Grieving," Renji echoed. "For what? Aizen's death?" "No, the loss of his innocence," Ishida intoned grimly. "For having to kill someone. A circle, made up of 2 Getsuga, one white, one black. Hollow and Shinigami. Vizard. That tattoo may very well be Kurosaki's way of self-punishment." Every time he looks in the mirror bare-chested, the tattoo will always remind him of who and what he is underneath his human skin. Kurosaki Ichigo, Vizard, Slayer of Aizen, Substitute Shinigami, a penance, never allowing himself to forget. The Quincy turned his eyes towards the retreating figure of his rival. If that is the case, then I have gravely underestimated his intelligence and understanding of the symbolic. So that's why Kurosaki-kun didn't like us talking about it, Inoue whispered sadly. He was having fun, and then we reminded him of what he was trying to take a vacation from. We should go apologize, Chad suggested, and received a round of nods all around. Ichigo dove into the waves, fully submerging himself and kicking powerfully. His eyes stung from the salt water, but he kept them open as he swam further from the shore. The cool water was refreshing as it streamed past him to the beach, and after a few more strokes, he turned back around. Ichigo knew he couldn't go too far from the shore in his human body, the ocean's pull was too strong. Swimming back to shore and exulting in the rush of cold water offsetting the heat of the sun's rays, Ichigo stood in water that reached his waist and ran a hand through his hair as he continued walking back to the beach, shifting his soaked hair away from his eyes so he could actually see. He felt a lot better now. I suppose I should apologize to the others for just taking off like that. He made his way back to his friends, not noticing how much attention he was getting from some of the women, and a couple of the men. But Ichigo was surprised that before he could say anything, Renji approached him, looking slightly away, down to his left, with his right hand behind his neck embarrassedly. Listen, Ichigo, sorry about that. Didn't know it was a sensitive topic. Don't worry about it, Ichigo replied, shrugging as he sat down on his towel, leaning back and enjoying the feel of the sun. Hey, Renji, Rukia. How's the Gote treating you? You didn't get in trouble for helping us back in Hueco Mundo, did you? Nah, Renji answered easily, relaxing when it seemed apparent that Ichigo was alright. He was still a little worried, given Ishida's guess about the reasons for Ichigo's tattoo, but he was willing to let it go for the time being. Renji had hardly any room to talk, considering his own heavily tattooed upper body. Kuchiki Taicho vouched for us, saying that we technically hadn't broken any orders. It was decided that it turned out for the best since we all got back before the invasion began. Especially since Orihime took down the number 2 Espada when a team of Shinigami and Arrancar couldn't do it together, Rukia added. What? Ichigo turned to stare incredulously at Inoue. You did that? Inoue looked distinctly unhappy with the reminder. Yes I did. Impressive, Ishida commented. What he said, Ichigo agreed. You've gotten a lot stronger. Her eyes began to tear up, much to the Vizard's confusion. Why are you happy about this? Orihime, Rukia, who obviously knew what Inoue was upset about, tried to console. They don't know. Know what? Ichigo asked, confused. Ishida apparently got it a second later, though, as he sighed. Kurosaki, Inoue must have used her power to reject the Espada. His soul is gone, as though he'd been pierced by one of my arrows. Not waiting for his rival to respond, he got up and crouched next to Inoue, looking into her teary eyes and holding her hands in his own. Inoue, listen to me. You did nothing wrong. But no, Ishida interrupted. You did nothing wrong. You were fighting for not just your life, but everyone else's, right? And you only stepped in when nothing else would stop him, right? Right, Inoue stuttered. Then you did nothing wrong. It's sad that you had to do what you did, but do not back down from it. You had little other choice, or else you wouldn't have even considered it. I know that because I know you. The only way you would use your power that way is if you couldn't think of any other way to stop him, the Quincy stated firmly. So grieve if you must. Be sad, angry, anything you want. But you did nothing wrong. Inoue hiccuped, but eventually, she nodded slowly. Satisfied, Ishida got up and moved back to his towel. Ichigo looked at the Quincy in poorly concealed shock, first his father, then Ishida. Did everyone know how to handle crying women but him? Masaki was led by Pound to a very large, elegant-looking building. Admiring the scenery, she was guided through long halls and into an enormous room. Already inside were perhaps a dozen or so figures, all shrouded in black cloaks. There were 3 garbed in what appeared to be high-class garments, who stood in prominent position at the end of the room. An old woman, looking perhaps 60 or so, with a wrinkling face and short shock white hair, a black-haired middle-aged man with a beard but no mustache, and a young man who appeared in his late teens, with similar features to the middle-aged one, but with no facial hair. "Allow me to introduce, Kurosaki Masaki," Pound stated with a deep bow. Taking the hint, Masaki did the same, bowing politely. "Leave us." It was impossible to tell who ordered that, as the voice echoed in the chamber. It could have been any of them, but its authoritative voice could not be denied. "Hi." Still bowing, Pound retreated and closed the door. "Kurosaki Masaki, do you know why we requested your presence?" the old woman asked plainly. "I'm afraid not. I was told that it had to do with your duties as a noble family, and that was all." "That is as it should be. The Barine family is to remain in shadow. Very few are ever to know what it is we were assigned," the male adult continued calmly. "However, due to the unique situation, in order for us to fulfill our duty you must be made aware so you may help us. The duty of the Barine family is to accumulate and safeguard all forbidden and dangerous knowledge," the old woman spoke once more. "We are the specialists within the government. When situations arise involving such knowledge, we are called on in secret to provide informed advice without compromising the actual material of the forbidden knowledge. When Shinigami gained hollow powers 100 years ago, it was our advice that was called upon in secret. As you have no doubt surmised, this meeting is about your son, Kurosaki Ichigo," the man stated. "In exchange for your information, we are offering unlimited access to the seraiti and information of your son's contacts. This was the offer made to you through Pound Miro, correct?" "Yes. And do you accept?" Masaki nodded firmly. "Yes." "Very well." The man looked towards the others in the room, who had not moved. "Begin." And so the interrogation began. "Kurosaki Ichigo is the son of a human and a Shinigami, correct?" "We are aware of the incident in which Kurosaki Ichigo acquired the powers of Kuchiki Rukia. When did Kurosaki Ichigo acquire his own Shinigami powers, and through what process did he do so? Describe the events relating to Kurosaki Ichigo's struggles with his inner hollow up to the resolution. How did Kurosaki Ichigo avoid being consumed by his inner hollow while the hollow was in control for an extended period of time? Why did Kurosaki Ichigo's mask change? Kurosaki Ichigo's Zanpakuto is not a dual sword type. How did he gain a second one? If your son were to classify himself, would he be a Shinigami with hollow powers, or a hollow with Shinigami powers? Does Kurosaki Ichigo have the Hogyoku, and if so, does he plan to use it? Were you able to feel your son's spiritual presence when he arrived to fight Aizen in Karakura? How did Kurosaki Ichigo achieve Resurrection? Which, if any, hollow powers does Kurosaki know and with what skill can he use them?" Question after question, Masaki answered to the best of her ability. Finally, the onslaught of queries ended, and after a minute of silence, the middle-aged man who still had not identified himself nodded. "Very well. It seems we are done here. Thank you for your cooperation, Kurosaki Masaki. Now for us to uphold our end of the agreement." He snapped his fingers. Immediately, one of the faceless black-hooded figures approached and withdrew an amethyst attached to a necklace, and some paper from some folder pocket, passing them wordlessly to Masaki. "Thank you." The figure merely bowed and returned to his place with the others. "The necklace serves as proof of our agreement. It is a symbol of our family. Any who wear it will be led in by the gatekeepers outside the seraiti without issue. The paper, as promised, details your son's known associates and how to find them. That concludes our transaction. Pound Miro will escort you back to your estate," the still unnamed apparent head of the family stated dismissively. At his words, the two men guarding the doorway opened it once more. "Thank you, Barine-sama," Masaki said gracefully with a bow, before turning back and leaving the room. "So, looks like it went well?" Pound asked curiously. "I think so," Masaki agreed, looking at the necklace she still held in her hand for another moment before putting it on. "They had a lot of questions for me." "No doubt. Your son is rather famous," Pound told her matter-of-factly. "There is talk of little else in the seraiti. Starting off as a spiritually aware human, being given power by a noble and becoming as powerful as he has in such a short time, it's impossible but true." "I see. Could you help me find these people?" Masaki asked, showing him the list she'd received from the elders. The servant peered at it for a few moments. I should be able to get you to this one, but I would have to leave immediately after. That's fine. All right. Then let's go see Kuchiki Byakuya. 20 or so minutes later, Masaki stood in front of a very large mansion. This is the Kuchiki mansion, Pound told her quietly. Remember, the Kuchiki are another family of nobles, so be as polite and deferential as you can. What can you tell me about my son's relationship with this? Masaki looked down at the paper again. Kuchiki Byakuya. My son told me that he fought him to a draw once while trying to save Kuchiki Rukia. Then you know almost as much as I do, Pound admitted. Kuchiki Byakuya-sama is Taicho of the 6th Division, and head of the Kuchiki family. I think that Kurosaki Ichigo may have gained Kuchiki-sama's respect for saving his sister, but I would not imply such without him stating it first, he warned. This may not have been the best starting point. No, it's fine, Masaki assured her friend and escort. I have some questions for him anyway. If you're sure, Pound shook his head. I'm sorry, but I must go back now. If you have some spare time, you're welcome at my home at any time, Masaki invited him, grateful for Pound's help thus far. Thank you, the servant said with a smile. I appreciate that. I'll see if I can see you later this week. With that, he began briskly walking back. Masaki looked at the mansion again. She was about to meet one of the most powerful beings in Soul Society, if she understood everything correctly. Urahara had told her that the Taicho of the Gote 13 were the most powerful Shinigami in Soul Society, both in strength and in political power. Kuchiki Byakuya was also the head of a noble family, which made things more complicated, but Masaki would not give up when she was this close. Who are you? A cold voice asked quietly from right behind her. Masaki spun around, startled. The man standing there looked at her coolly without expression, his slate-gray eyes almost completely devoid of emotion. He was wearing what she'd come to recognize as the standard Shinigami uniform, but there was a white haori on top of that, as well as an expensive-looking scarf and an ornamental hairpiece. Urahara had told her that was the easiest way to recognize a Taicho was by the white haori, so she took a chance and figured that this was probably who she was here to see. Bowing shortly, she introduced herself. I am Kurosaki Masaki. I presume you are Kuchiki Byakuya. Ah, there it was. Though the man's face did not twitch from the news, she could see in his eyes that he was surprised. He recovered quickly, however. I am, Byakuya acknowledged. What business do you have with me? I was told that you and your sister, Kuchiki Rukia, were two of the Shinigami that my son, Ichigo, associates with regularly. Your information is lacking, Byakuya stated bluntly. The only association that Kurosaki Ichigo has with me is through my adopted sister, Rukia. Why have you come? Taken aback by the noble's directness, Masaki took a moment to respond. I wish to remain a part of my son's life. As I am not a Shinigami myself, the only method I have is to contact Ichigo's friends and ask him to see me. I see. I would allow you to see Rukia, however she is currently on vacation with Kurosaki Ichigo in the living world. I have no way to contact her. Similarly, Abarai Renji is with them as well. Disappointed, Masaki bowed. Thank you for your time. Kurosaki Masaki, Byakuya interrupted her before she could turn to leave. Please come inside. It would be remiss of me to fail to offer you tea during your visit, and I find myself curious on a few matters regarding your son that perhaps you could aid me in understanding. Masaki smiled. Thank you. She followed him into the mansion. A few minutes later, they sat Caesar-style at the traditional table as a servant poured them some tea. After they each took a polite sip, Masaki set her tea down. You said you had questions. I do. Taking another moment to sip at his tea, Byakuya carefully formulated how he was going to ask what he had in mind. Are you aware that Kurosaki Ichigo once invaded Soul Society? Yes, in order to save your sister, Masaki confirmed. He had known Rukia for mere months prior to that event. I do not understand why he would risk his life for her. I am grateful for it, but I do not understand his motives. Masaki frowned pensively. Ichigo told me that he did it because she was a friend, and that he owed her a debt that would not allow him to simply let her die. She had saved my family from being killed and eaten by a hollow as I was. Ichigo felt it was a matter of honor that he save her in turn. I see. So he was not attempting to pursue a relationship with her. Masaki nearly spat out her tea. Instead, giving a polite cough, she swallowed and answered as steadily as she could. Not that I know of. Why do you ask? I have been carefully observing Rukia since then. What I have observed, in conjunction to the reports given to me by the Shinigami stationed in Karakura, seem to indicate that she is interested in him, Byakuya explained clearly, his voice matter of fact. There is, of course, the chance that I am wrong. I am hardly an expert at understanding my sister's point of view, or relationships in general. Now Ichigo's mother could hardly help herself. She had to know what sort of woman wanted to date her son. What have you seen that makes you think that she is interested in Ichigo? There are many subtle signs, such as her being more active and energetic when in his presence, but the key was reported to me by Hitsugaya Taicho during his assignment in the living world. It seems that Rukia prefers to sleep in your son's closet and indeed insisted on it while on assignment in the living world. Masaki's eyes widened. That was a detail that Ichigo had carefully left out. I was unaware of that, she finally said, slightly in a daze. I see your point. I do not believe you fully do, Kurosaki-san, Byakuya stated calmly. Allow me to elaborate. Your son is terrible at controlling his spiritual power. Until quite recently, it emitted from him constantly. Rukia was comfortable sleeping in that presence, which is rather unusual. For that to occur, she must trust him absolutely, without hesitation. The fact that she insists on it implies far more. Masaki's mouth went dry. She could think of nothing to say to that. The head of the Kuchiki nodded. I see you comprehend the gravity of the situation. It is my duty both as her elder brother to do what is best for her, just as it is your duty as Kurosuke Ichigo's mother to do what is best for him. I ask that you provide me with any information that may be pertinent to such, and in return I will do the same for you. Masaki nodded in agreement. Excellent. If it is permissible, I would have Rukia visit you for a time after she returns. There may be things she would reveal to you that she would be uncomfortable repeating to me. Additionally, it provides another point of view as to her current emotional state. That's fine, Masaki assented. Should you see my son before I do, please let him know to find me in the West 1st District. Very well. They both took a sip of tea before Byakuya turned a deadly serious expression towards Masaki. Out of respect for Kurosaki Ichigo, I give you this warning. Kurosaki-san, your son is extremely powerful, and would be a valuable asset to those he supports. You must take extreme care. You represent leverage over him, and have little protection, political or otherwise. Trust no one. If you can, persuade your son to stay with you until he is no longer needed. They reached the doors to the mansion, and the noble Taicho locked eyes with his companion. Kurosaki Ichigo's strength is a direct threat to the status quo. What do you mean? Yamamoto Sotaicho, the leader of the Gote 13, has been the strongest being in Seoul society for centuries, no, millennia. This has never been challenged, until now. A human, a teenager no less, may be stronger than him, Byakuya explained succinctly. History dictates that when a being gains too much power, too quickly, the most common scenario is that the being will go mad and become a threat to everyone around it. When considered with the observation that Kurosaki Ichigo embraces his hollow powers, it is plain to see what Yamamoto Sotaicho is likely thinking. Masaki's grip threatened to shatter the teacup she was holding. He plans to kill my son, she hissed. Ichigo's done nothing wrong. I concur, Byakuya agreed with a regal nod of his head. There are other factors at work, however. According to all reports, Kurosaki Ichigo has amassed a considerable following, both within and without the Gote 13. Should overt action be taken against him, it is increasingly likely that a civil war will begin. As a result, I suspect that you will be used against your son. Souls without power, such as you, are very rarely tracked, and accidents happen in every district. To circumvent this, I repeat my suggestion that Kurosaki Ichigo stay by your side until the possibility of hostility has waned. Masaki didn't doubt that Ichigo would do just that if she asked it of him. But she didn't want to be a burden on her son. I see. You have given me much to consider, Kuchiki Byakuya. Thank you for your time and consideration. I shall be returning to my residence now. As you wish. I shall have a servant escort you. That evening, Ichigo looked out towards the sunset. It was hard to believe that he was really, truly, getting the vacation he wanted. It felt like a dream. Glancing at the phone that Urahara had gave him, he smiled when he realized that it wasn't ringing. Nothing terribly important had come up, and that meant that Ichigo had plenty of time to relax. Then why do I feel like I should be preparing for something? The substitute murmured aloud. Aizen's dead, the Central 46 is crippled, I'm on good terms with most of the Taicho. Ulquiorra would warn me if something happened in Hueco Mundo. Ichigo shook his head, trying to clear his head. It's probably just a side effect from the war, I'm not used to not having enemies yet. Deciding to take a shower to get his mind off things, as well as rinse off all the salt and sand that had clung to his body from the excursion to the beach, Ichigo stepped into the bathroom and turned on the hot water. One steaming hot shower later, Ichigo dried himself off with the towel and glanced briefly at the mirror to make sure he hadn't left any shampoo in his hair. He yelped with surprise when instead of his normal reflection, he saw his resurrection self, horned mask and all. Jumping back and hitting the wall painfully, Ichigo tried to slow his suddenly racing heart. Looking into the mirror again, he once again saw something aside from his own reflection. Or rather, he did see his mirror image, but not in the usual sense. Heya, Ichigo, Ichigo's hollow reflection greeted with a smirk. Aside from nearly giving me a heart attack, what's up? I want to renegotiate our deal. Ichigo raised an eyebrow. What's wrong with the way it is now? There's no point in our deal anymore. You've gotten all the hollow powers I know of, and you've got resurrection. You're not afraid to fight, and you've acknowledged that you like fighting. You have the instinct, and the experience to use it. Vasto Lord is the last upgrade in your hollow evolution line, and you don't want that just yet because you're having difficulty controlling your power as it is. Until that time, I have literally nothing left I can teach you that I know of. That doesn't explain why you want to change our bi-weekly fights, Ichigo pointed out. I can't win against you anymore if you go all out, Cazador admitted reluctantly. I can't stop you from entering Bankai, or Resurrection. Zangetsu and I were born of your soul, and now that you have accepted that you are the source of your own power, we have only as much control over your power as you allow us. So you want me to impose a restriction on myself during our fights? Ichigo guessed. Nah, it's not as much fun knowing that you're holding back, Cazador denied easily. It'd be kinda insulting, really. I only ever want to win if I've earned it, Ichigo. Same as you. So, what do you want, then? Ichigo was baffled. If Cazador didn't want him to hold back so they could fight on equal footing, then Ichigo had no idea how to make their fight fair. What I want, Ichigo, is to sleep until I'm needed. I blame you for this change, by the way, the hollow avatar of Ichigo's powers remarked casually. Your heart, our heart, yearns for rest, to take a break from fighting. That leaves me, the embodiment of your instinct, to sleep until you call me forth again. Sorry. The wizard tried to apologize, unsure if Cazador was upset about the change or not. Cazador smirked in response. I'll always be here in your soul, Ichigo. You ain't getting rid of me that easily. The next time your blood sings with the thrill of combat, I'll be there. In the meantime, goodnight, King. See y'all later. Only my hollow could make a pleasant farewell sound dark and creepy, Ichigo thought to himself as he felt Cazador de la Luna settle and fade into silence inside his inner world. Shaking his head and noting that the mirror now gave his true reflection, Ichigo threw on some casual clothes and looked out once more at the sky. Dusk had fallen and the first of the stars could be seen. Ichigo let a tiny smile cross his face. Things are finally beginning to look up, he murmured. The door opened suddenly, and Renji entered the room carrying a familiar lion plushie. Hey Ichigo, Rukia just threw this at me and wants an explanation. She'll be by in a minute, so I think you should get your story ready. Ichigo, Khan cried out pitifully. I begged and I pleaded to be allowed to stay with them, but Rukia kicked me out. Ichigo couldn't say he was surprised. That's too bad. She probably didn't want to run the risk of accidentally waking up with you cuddled next to her or Inoue. You don't exactly have the best track record, you know. Khan sighed as Renji set him down on the table. Ichigo, why is he here? Renji questioned again. He did me a favor, the substitute Shinigami said simply. In return, he wanted to come along. Didn't really think it'd be a problem. Renji shrugged. I've got no problem with him. It's Rukia you have to worry about. Ichigo sighed, hearing the sound of stomping footsteps coming closer. And 3, 2, 1. Rukia slammed the door open, looking absolutely murderous. Ichigo. Yes, Rukia, Ichigo asked tiredly. Why is he here? She demanded. Apparently Khan did him a favor, Renji reported, saving Ichigo the trouble of repeating himself. Khan is a person too, Ichigo reminded Rukia. He wanted to come along and actually spend some time with you before you went back to Soul Society since we don't know when you'll be back. I can sympathize. Rukia began to deflate on hearing that. But he doesn't have to sleep in my and Orihime's bedroom. You know how he is. I know that Khan is usually a perv, Ichigo admitted. But it's his right to ask, you know. He turned to Khan. And it's her right to decide whether you can stay there. She's said no, so that means you're staying with me for the time being. Khan nodded, a little put out. If that's how it is, then I guess it's fine. He looked up at the diminutive Shinigami. Can I come over to talk sometimes, at least, Nei-san? After vacation's over, you'll be going back to Soul Society again for Kami knows how long. Rukia crossed her arms and sighed in defeat. That's fine. You can come over after dinner for a short while. The mod soul immediately brightened up. Thanks, Rukia-ne. Yoruichi flashed into Urahara's vision, touching down lightly on the ground. I was too late, Kazuki. But I have to agree, the Reiatsu was most assuredly not Shinigami, and not hollow, though it was similar enough to a hollow's to be mistaken as one at first glance. I see, Urahara mused. That doesn't leave many other options. Still, it's not enough data to determine with any precision whether it's a unique being, or simply one difficult to catalog. We will have to wait until it appears again. Yoruichi nodded, with a slight smirk. For once, something interesting happened without Ichigo-kun here. He'll be pissed. I did promise we'd take care of any issues while he was gone. Let him have his vacation, Urahara advised, waving a paper fan in front of his face. By the way. Yes, I know, another hollow just appeared. Yoruichi groaned. Back in a few. Shi Shunpo-ed away to take care of the interloper. Urahara narrowed his eyes in thought, looking at a map he'd pulled up. This was the second time the pseudo-hollow had appeared before vanishing. Carefully marking the map with a red marker where the enemy had been, he nodded to himself as he confirmed that both events were relatively close in location. Was there something attracting the foe, or was it simply an area it liked? More research would be required. But why was the Reiatsu so terribly familiar? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, comment and subscribe, as well as checking out the author on fanfiction.net.